Hi guys, it's MJ Gallagher here, and I'm just looking to do a little analysis and breakdown of the new teaser trailer that we received for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. It obviously came as a bit of a surprise to us all, and it's absolutely fantastic that we will get to play as Yuffie in this expansion for the remake. Before we begin, I'll actually just look at the name itself. Intergrade is a biological term, which means for entities to gradually merge into form a new being. In this case, it might actually refer to the remake itself, in terms of the compilation entities that are coming together to make the remake, or it could actually be the different titles that are merging onto the PlayStation 5, for which at this time it does appear to be exclusively released. The word itself, Intergrade, it might actually also be a small allusion to the interlude title for Final Fantasy IV, which was a short title that took place between the original Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy IV The After Years. So I wonder if that came into play. Obviously, the trailer was revealed during the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 State of Play show. I think it's safe to say that the announcement came as a bit of a shock to most of us. There has obviously been for quite a long time rumours of a Tifa DLC, but this really kind of the speculation for that ramped up with the Material Ultimania that was released, which revealed that there had been an entire chapter cut from the remake that sort of focused on Tifa following the events at Mako Reactor 5, and within that it was also revealed that Tifa would be able to obtain a dress that was styled on Yuffie. So I wonder if that has had a bearing on where this scenario came from. Obviously, if you are not familiar with the broader story of Final Fantasy VII, or even just the remake, do be careful for spoilers here, but I'll plough ahead as if everyone is very aware of that. So, in terms of the trailer itself, it reveals, or it opens to reveal an image through a scope of some sort. The crosshairs in the middle obviously make it look like a sort of sniper rifle, which does evoke feelings of Dirge of Cerberus in the Final Fantasy VII compilation. Throughout this trailer itself, there is actually a huge amount of references to Dirge of Cerberus, so I will come back to those and point them out as they appear. We also get to hear Yuffie speaking for the first time, where she says that she has finally made it to Midgar. This is possibly a bit of a meta reference, because obviously she is one of the playable characters in the original Final Fantasy VII, but does not appear until after the Midgar scenario, so there was no reason to have her here in the remake, which the remake itself is obviously set in Midgar in its entirety. We see that Yuffie is looking at one of the support pillars and then the reactor, which, as we know from the sort of remake itself, the Avalanche have bombed Mako Reactor 1 and Mako Reactor 5 in quick succession, so it would make sense as an anti-Shinra operative that Yuffie would be interested in that. And we as we're looking at the scope itself, note the characters that are appearing around the circumference here. I don't read Hanzi or Kanji, so I'm uncertain which characters or which language this specifically relates to, but what it does immediately confirm is that this is Wutai tech. Wutai, of course, is associated with the Far East in real life. When the image cuts to Yuffie herself, we see that she's dressed in her Mughal poncho, which is exactly how she first appears in Dirge of Cerberus when she rescues Vincent from Shinra Manor. You might note that the style of the poncho now resembles the Muggles from the remake, which the most prominent appearance is in the Chocobo Mog materia, or even from Moggy, the young tradesman from the Sector 5 Centre District. What's also quite interesting to note is that the birds that appear here, this is sort of the third reveal trailer that we've had in the context of the remake. The first one was back in 2015, which showed a white bird flying over the construction cranes into Midgar. The second one is the actual opening introduction scene to the remake itself, which has a blackbird flying over the wastelands of Midgar, and now we have the Yuffie expansion or DLC or whatever you want to call it, and the opening again has birds. So I wonder if that has a connection to something. Based on the plate that we see overhead here, we can note that Yuffie has already made it inside the boundaries of Midgar, and it's unclear from here exactly which sector she has arrived in, but I think it's fair to say from the rest of the trailer that this is Sector 7. Just very quickly before I move on, what I wanted to sort of point out as well is that on her greaves or on her gloves, Yuffie actually has a pink bow that's tied around there. Now this is of particular interest because she does happen to wear one in Advent Children as well. Now all of the characters have a pink bow tied around some part of their anatomy during the film, quite simply as an homage to Aerith, who lost her life during the original game. Yuffie is a special case though, because she actually has two. She has one on her upper arm and one on her shuriken during Advent Children, so I wonder if this is either a foreshadowing or a nod to something else or whatever. And when Yuffie actually falls off the wall clumsily, it's also another callback to Dirge of Cerberus, where there are a few moments in that game where she is unsteady on her feet, despite being an accomplished ninja. It's kind of a running joke for the duration of the game and for the duration of the compilation, that she does get herself into some silly situations. So this is really just a continuation of that. You might also note the area below here does have a sort of railway track down there. Now this is possibly near to the train graveyard, which, as we learn in the remake, was actually a sort of depot for construction materials during the erection of, or the construction of Midgar and the erection of the plate. Again, because we know that the trailer itself is quite a large part of it is set in Sector 7. It does again play into the idea that this may be the outskirts of the train graveyard. In the Avalanche hideout itself, Yuffie shows off her materia, which is of course an allusion to her obsession with the magic orbs, and she even goes as far to call herself a materia hunter. You may also note the Moogle doll in the background here, and this appears to be an older version of the design, which is closer to the doll that was held by the girl in Calm during the Deepground invasion, or during the opening scene of Dirge of Cerberus. So yet again, that's another sort of callback to that. And Yuffie further reveals her position to be an elite special forces operative for the new Wutai government. This offers quite a bit of insight into the changes in the remake, because the old game simply had Wutai ruled by her father, Godo Kisaragi, and the 5 mighty gods. It's also possible that the old Wutai government is the one that lost the war during Crisis Core, and obviously historically before that against Shinra. And what is extremely important to highlight is that in this scene, Yuffie presents herself as an ally to Avalanche while acting in an official capacity for the Wutai government. Therefore, it means that the propaganda that we heard on Shinra News throughout the remake was actually true, rather than just stirring up anti-Wutai sentiment. We're then shown some new Avalanche members that Yuffie is speaking to. These obviously are characters that have not really been seen before. It's possible that we already know their names of some of them. In Chapter 14, in Chapter 14 of the remake, if you obtain the Barrett scene outside Aerith's house, he talks about other members of Avalanche. Those are Finn, a lazy young boy who might relate to this character here. And you know, Finn has a great artistic talent. He's actually the boy who did the stamp graffiti in the tunnels. There's also Al, who's the intel guy and a bit of a ladies' man. This may relate to this character here. And then there is Nelly, who is said to be the quartermaster, of one of the Avalanche cells, and is a close friend of Jessie's. This girl here does actually seem to be in charge, so she might in fact be Nelly herself. When the figure enters the room, he is identified as the person that Yuffie has come to see. The dialogue itself infers that he has been working with Avalanche for some time, but note that the style of his armour and the lance on his back are actually quite similar to those shown for the Wutai soldiers during Crisis Core, whose equipment was the sort of polearms or lances, and they did have sort of Imperial armour as well. And these are the characters that are fought by Zack during the Fort Tamblin raid at the beginning of Crisis Core, but they also later show up in Midgar after the war during the soldier side quests. So the individual introduces himself as Sonon Kizukawa, who is a totally new character. I think a lot of people have sort of picked up on sort of Zack and Geo vibes going on here, but yeah, he is totally new. After this, we go elsewhere in Sector 7. And we see a scene with Barrett, Tifa and Biggs, which reveals that this scenario does in fact take place after the Reactor 5 bombing, because Cloud of course has fallen into Aerith's church. This, as I mentioned before, is the same time period that was for the proposed Tifa chapter that was cut from the remake. So that was just sort of moved some of the details around here. It's also very likely that the scene that Tifa's voice actress, Britt Barron, was recording when she and Jessie's voice actress, Erika Lindbeck, were photographed at Square Enix's Burbank studios. It is very possible that this is the scene they were recording for, which then means that we may actually get to see Jessie as part of the Yuffie expansion as well. And when after this scene, it cuts back to Yuffie, who is shown to be nearby, and she thinks it's really cool that this is the team that blew up the reactor, and she actually asks to go say hi, but Sonon is already aware that they're probably being watched by Shinra. The scene itself here also provides a better look at Sonon's polearm. We can see a small bell at the top of it, and even some fish scales that are going on as part of the weapon itself, which may actually allude to Leviathan, who is one of the patron deities of Wutai. And just hiding in the background here is the wandering tourist, which is a sort of common feature throughout the remake, or in the slums anyway, just to sort of help make you feel a little bit more at home here. So after this, we see another scene of what appears to be an Avalanche member distracting the Shinra officers, which is outside one of the Sector 7 slum yards. This actually also may be the character Al, as he does strike me as a bit of a ladies' man. One very curious point to note here is the label on his breast pocket. It actually reads G Army. Now, the G Army in Crisis Core were the Genesis copies, so the reference here is a bit weird, unless it actually alludes to Genesis themselves' presence in Deepground at this time, following the events of Crisis Core. One final thing just to point out for that little scene there is the music playing in the background is actually a remix of Descendant of Shinobi, which is this theme song for Yuffie during the original Final Fantasy VII. So following this, we move on to a few shots of Yuffie running around in her poncho, and when we see her running, she does have her arms outstretched, just as she does in the old game. The first shot here does also confirm that we get to have a degree of control over Sonon, as he can be seen with some materia in his lance over at the side here. We can also see from here that part of the mission also takes place in the elevated framework of the sort of construction going on above the Midgar slums, but I'll come back to that shortly. Similarly, one of the next shots shows Yuffie can use her ninja skills to run along walls, which is something that Red 13 could do in the remake itself, albeit you didn't have control over him. And the scene eventually comes to Yuffie in the sort of derelict area of what appears to be the outskirts of the city again. Note again the sort of railway yard over in the corner here. This is a likely connection to the sort of opening scene where we saw Yuffie fall off the wall. If so, it would suggest that this is a tutorial section for the expansion, which would make sense because for anyone who's not played it already, there may be a few changes for the PlayStation 5 version of the remake, or it may also just be testing some of the capabilities of the PlayStation 5. There's also confirmation here that just as Barrett does during the sort of Deepground chapter in the remake, Yuffie can use her shuriken to attack or break boxes from long range. So it does confirm that she has speed like Tifa, but does have long range attacks like Barrett. And during the fight with the Cripshays, we are also shown that Yuffie and Sonon can work together for combo attacks. This is really cool, and it's an addition for Intergrade that may be used in later remake installments. Down here we can see that Yuffie has her throw command again, but it's unclear if what is happening here relates to that, or if that's just a different command. It's also worth pointing out that Sonon seems to be using a sort of dragoon-like lance, or that he is a dragoon-like character, which isn't or might not just be an allusion to his past as a possible Wutai soldier, but it may actually just be a trial run for Sid Highwind, who himself is also a Dragoon. And later in the trailer, Yuffie and Sonon are attacked by a giant Shinra weapon, which appears to be in the form of a centipede. This follows on from the theme of the Scorpion Sentinel and the Crab Warden from the remake, and also the Guard Spider from Crisis Core. So, you know, my money is on this being called the Centipede Steward or something. Also note that the location here is high above the slums, but it does seem very close to the central pillar, which we can kind of see upside down over here. This may be another Dirge of Cerberus reference, as Vincent has to ascend this complex from the train graveyard in that game, and then faces off against Rosso the Crimson in a similar setting to where we find ourselves here. We're then shown a bit more of Yuffie and Sonon teaming up in battle, with Sonon using his lance to launch Yuffie into the air. This is a bit of a callback to Advent Children, where Sid does something similar. Sonon also calls Yuffie boss in this scene, again confirming that she outranks him from a military perspective. And if anyone had actually been wondering, Yuffie's 4-pointed shuriken does actually have 3 materia slots, as we can see down here, which is exactly the same as it was in the original Final Fantasy VII. But of course, perhaps the best reveal of all in this scene is our first proper look at Yuffie's full outfit for the remake. It is very, very close to the original. They have been very, very accurate with this, and I personally just love this colour scheme. I think she looks terrific. So following on from this, we have the blonde ally again showing up, and he advises the pair that they should try to avoid being caught up in whatever they are planning. They are likely to be Shinra, and given the location, we might find that this is something to do with the Sector 7 collapse, and in which case, you know, there's perhaps a twist on what's going on during the collapse in the remake. This is then followed by a scene of Yuffie and Sonon on what seems to be one of the trains in the corkscrew tunnel, due to the ID scanner that we can see here. Sonon states that they deserve what's coming. Again, it's unclear if this is in relation to Shinra and thus the looming war with Wutai, or if it's actually in relation again to the Sector 7 collapse, which would explain Yuffie's disgust here. She says, "I'm not your sister," which I interpret to mean that she doesn't see herself as an ally anymore, which suggests that by the end of the expansion, these two are not going to be friends. And in what must have come as much of a shock to most of us as the announcement of the DLC itself, we get to see Deepground soldiers showing up. These guys were the antagonists of Dirge of Cerberus, and Yuffie herself did descend into Deepground to battle them with Vincent. It's unclear where this particular location is at the moment, but the most likely candidate is that it's beneath the Shinra building, where Vincent accesses Deepground during Dirge of Cerberus, which again would explain why Yuffie and Sonon were in or around the central pillar earlier in the trailer. Now, Deepground Soldier are a top secret organisation, so their presence here is highly irregular. It does suggest that they are carrying out a very secret task, or that for some reason Yuffie and so on have somehow made it to Deepground itself. It does however tie in quite nicely to chapter 13 of the remake itself, as I mentioned earlier, where Cloud, Barrett and Tifa do stumble upon one of Deepground's laboratories below Sector 7. And after the title of the DLC itself is revealed, there's a short section where Weiss the Immaculate appears. Weiss is the leader of the Sviets, who were the primary antagonists of Dirge of Cerberus. We see a few flashing images, and it's important to note the distinction between the scenes here. The first image is of Weiss sitting bare-chested on his throne in Deepground, which is very similar to how he was first revealed in Dirge of Cerberus, where he is commanding the Deepground army to slaughter those tainted with geostigma. His words here of "let the hunt begin" also reflects this. For those unfamiliar with the plot of Dirge of Cerberus online, Weiss had been chained to the throne for years by the Restrictors, who were the leaders of Deepground before the Sviets. Weiss then orchestrates the Restrictors' defeat, and when he's released, he uses his synaptic net dive ability, just as Shulk does, to search the internet for a cure to the virus that has been released into his system. But this occurs round about the same time as the start of Dirge of Cerberus, when the worldwide network has been restored, which is why he eventually is taken over, or his mind is taken over, by Hojo, who had downloaded his own, or uploaded his own mind onto the network. But the second image that we see actually has Weiss clothed and with his twin gunblades, which are actually named Heaven and Earth, if you didn't already know. If you look closely, you'll see that in the background there is the sort of blue digital blocks which show that this is part of the combat simulator. So my guess is that the real Weiss isn't actually encountered during Intergrade, but the Immaculate is added as a secret boss to the Remake's combat simulator. There's even a possibility that this is him acting through his synaptic net dive abilities, and could be used to explain why he's in the combat simulator in the first place. But that's just my personal theory. So I hope that you have enjoyed my analysis. Thank you so much for listening. Obviously this raises so many questions about what to expect in the expansion, and also kind of further afield in terms of, you know, how does this tie in with Yuffie meeting up with the party in the next installment of the remake. What does this mean for Deepground moving forward, and potentially Genesis as well. But if you have any feedback, or if there's anything you think that I've missed, please do leave a comment below. And I would also like to invite you at this time to check out my Final Fantasy VII Remake compilation lore and Easter egg videos, which can be viewed via KupoCon's YouTube, and I'll leave a link to that below as well. And if you haven't already done so, please also consider picking up a copy of my new book, Norse Myths That Inspired Final Fantasy VII, which is on sale via Amazon now. But again, thank you for watching. I'm MJ Gallagher, and I'll speak to you again soon.